Welcome to Classical Education, a podcast for those who believe in rediscovering the art of asking questions, engaging in conversation, and attending to the ideas at the heart of well-ordered teaching and learning. I invite you to join me on a journey in pursuit of the true, the good, and the beautiful as a participant in the great conversation and listen to the many voices coming from the world of classical education. Hello, everyone. I have not launched a podcast for a little over a month because I had rotator cuff surgery. So here I am in my sling, and it's been a really rough recovery. So take care of your shoulders and try really hard not to have rotator cuff surgery like I have had. But I am excited because during my recovery, Society for Classical Learning invited myself and Chris Hall to lead some teacher sessions for their fall retreat in Dallas, and it is the last weekend of October. So Chris and I have been collaborating, and we are creating not only some wonderful sessions on the theory of classical education, but also some practical sessions where you will leave feeling equipped. Teachers will discover the transcendentals of truth, goodness, and beauty through theory and hands-on practicum sessions. This conference is also not only for classroom teachers, but home educators. And tickets are on sale at the Society for Classical Learning's website. Be sure to look at their link to the fall retreat, and you can read more about the sessions that Chris and I will be leading, as well as learning more about the other sessions and how to register for the conference. So this recording that I'm launching today, Chris and I did about 2 years ago. And I actually never launched it because it was for my Patreon account, which I don't have anymore. And so I found this, and it was a wonderful little conversation that he and I had about teaching and integrating poetry into science. So on this episode, we go over 3 different poems that are beautiful to incorporate into science class. And it's a lot of fun to do this little episode. And I'd also encourage you to go back to our season 1, episode 3. The link is in the show notes. And that is the conversation that Chris and I had about common arts and bringing the common arts back into the be incorporated with the liberal arts education. And he will be talking a lot about that at the Society for Classical Learning conference as well. But without further ado, I hope you enjoy this episode, and I hope it inspires you, and maybe we'll see you at the fall conference. Thank you for listening. This is Chris Hall back with us to share with us a few of his favorite poems. Really excited about this. When he shared with me which poems we were going to discuss, I said, this is perfect for our audience. So Chris, why don't you get us started and tell us which poems we're going to be reading today?
Certainly, I have 3, and all 3 of these are some of my favorites. I have a nice long list of those, but the ones I'm going to share are ones that are particularly close to me as a classical educator in general, and B, kind of a science educator. I've spent 26 years of my career as a science educator, and you have to realize just how much there is to being a science educator. We're swimming in a current moment with science that is very strange. And hearing these poems, I think you're going to hear a little bit of what a good classical educator might be able to get at as a science teacher here. I've got When I Heard the Learned Astronomer by Walt Whitman, The Peace of Wild Things by Wendell Berry, and I have Shakespeare's Sonnet 37, all 3 of those today.
Yeah, so Chris, let's start with one at a time. And I like to read poetry 3 times. One of the things I tell teachers when I'm doing teacher training is that with students, we read it 3 times. Usually, I will have the teacher read it out loud once, and then the students kind of reading it out loud in turns, and then a quiet reading if they're old enough to read. So how about you read it out loud first, and then I'll read it out loud. And then we'll go ahead and discuss it. We'll just do 2 readings since it's not necessarily in front of our viewers right now. I mean, our listeners.
Okay. Certainly. So this is When I Heard the Learned Astronomer by Walt Whitman. When I heard the learned astronomer, when the proofs, the figures were ranged in columns before me, when I was shown the charts and diagrams to add, divide, and measure them, when I, sitting, heard the astronomer where he lectured with much applause in the lecture room, how soon unaccountable I became tired and sick, till rising and gliding out, I wandered off by myself in the mystical, moist night air, and from time to time looked up in perfect silence at the stars.
Okay. When I heard The Learned Astronomer by Walt Whitman. When I heard The Learned Astronomer, when the proofs, the figures were ranged in columns before me, when I was shown the charts and diagrams to add, divide, and measure them, when I, sitting, heard the astronomer where he lectured with much applause in the lecture room, how soon unaccountable I became tired and sick, till rising and gliding out I wandered off by myself in the mystical, moist night air, and from time to time looked up in perfect silence at the stars. I'm going to read it backwards. Sometimes I do this with my little students that I'm teaching at a co-op, and they love to hear it backwards. And then we talk about whether it works backwards, and we vote on whether we like it
Hmm.
backwards better than forwards, because sometimes we hear things differently backwards. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the last line and go up. Looked up in perfect silence at the stars, in the mystical, moist night air, and from time to time, till rising and gliding out I wandered off by myself. How soon unaccountable I became tired and sick. Much applause in the lecture room when I, sitting, heard the astronomer where he lectured with and measured them, when I was shown the charts and diagrams to add, divide, me, when the proofs, the figures were ranged in columns before, when I heard the learned astronomer. Kind of interesting backwards. I didn't do much for me, but some of them work beautifully backwards.
This one kind of feels like you're climbing down into a pit versus coming back up and out of it. It's a strange feeling, isn't it? You can catch Walt's kind of his tricks of the trade by setting the poem up the way he does. Hearing it in reverse even emphasizes it to me.
Yeah. So tell us why you love this poem. What does it do inside of you?
This poem, I've loved this for years. I actually discovered this poem when I was a philosophy major in college. I was taking, of course, science classes, physics on the side. But I discovered this because I was reminded of something really important about our study. And that is you can't get bogged down in the specifics of the study. You can't get bogged down in the material of the study, the diagrams, the add, the divide, the measure. And if you spend your time only there, you miss all that glory above, all that heavenly glory that's floating right there, just to be understood without a word, without a chart, without analysis. Perhaps it's almost a visceral feeling of standing there in the presence of. And that's a beautiful thing. As a science educator, that resonates with me a lot. Where our discipline is so full of facts and figures that it's so easy to think that the A minus on the latest quiz is the way to go. Oh, I know my science. But if we don't have a visceral understanding of it in situ in creation, then we're losing the essence of it. It becomes a dissection rather than a living thing.
Right. It's interesting because what really stuck out to me was the I became tired and sick. That's how I felt with learning science in school because it was just lectures and textbooks that were so dry and boring. And so I never became enamored with science. But now that I'm older, I spend so much time just going outside and looking up at the moon and the stars and the sky. And I mean, I'm almost 52 years old and I still wonder, what are the clouds made out of? Just the sense of wonder. I mean, because I don't really remember what they're made out of from the textbooks I learned from. I mean, I know they're water, but I mean, even do we really know? Like I ask these kinds of questions. There's so much we don't know when we look up the sky. And when you take the time to do that, you ask those wonder questions that I think engage a student for wanting to learn more,
Yes.
which really is the essence of what we're talking about with helping children fall in love with learning, right?
Amen. Amen.
Hmm.
Can I share a moment with you out of a lesson I just taught this last Friday about clouds? Just to
Yes, I'd
just to
love
throw
to.
this one at you for yeah,
Yeah.
alongside this poem. We were sitting out, a couple of local homeschoolers and I, in the fire ring out back of my house. I had just set a group of middle school biologists on a lesson tour of my side garden to tell me what the weeds were, to go and identify these weeds and report back. And you're going to give me a grand tour of what we have here. But I sat with my elementary schoolers and I said, we're at the bottom of an ocean. an ocean of air. It's 62 miles deep and it goes all the way up to the edge of space above us. And here we are, bottom dwellers on the ocean of air. Well, imagine if you go down to the bottom of the big ocean, the water ocean that you know, and you turn on the light, there are still fish there. We're like those fish. What is it like to be those fish? Well, we're under pressure, and how do we find our way around? We're sensitive to currents and others. And I said, there are currents in our ocean too. They're the winds, and up high there are these currents that carry the clouds. And we know that the clouds are made of tiny droplets of water that form when the temperature gets so cold the air can't even hold on to the water anymore. And so what you're doing is teaching all the facts of science. And it went on for half an hour. We're teaching all the facts of science within a narrative framework to kids who are looking for a story of the world. And if you can do that, it becomes a beautiful thing. And then the inquisitiveness just flows from those things. Well, if we're like those fish, then how is it like X or Y? And the whole thing becomes facts woven within a tapestry that is beautiful, good, true, and beautiful.
Oh my goodness, Chris, you've just made me want to sign up for your science classes. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking this is brilliant. The metaphor of that we are in an ocean. I love that so much. That is,
Bottom of the ocean of air.
I love that. Where did you get that? Did you read it? Did something inspire you to think that, or did
Uh,
you?
I was thinking about it while I was thinking a long time ago about the ocean's layers and how sunlight only gets down through the top 300 feet or so. Below that, it's dark, but there are names for those layers based on salinity and others. And I thought, if I'm teaching elementary school, I can throw these terms out there in a multiple choice quiz and a matching definitions, or I can say, tell me the story. Because young children are very good at recounting stories. So why don't we play to their strengths? And look, they're trying to make sense of the world through story too. It's why we offer them great literature. And science is great literature, but it's full of these precising vocabulary terms, settings, and plot lines, and other things that we can fill in just as easily. It's a beautiful. I suppose that maybe my philosophy major in some ways helped me a lot with my science teaching. There's a poetry in the midst of all these things, not just of rationality and reason, of logical calculus, but to be, as Wendell Berry says in a moment, in the peace of wild things, right? There's your contemplation, your contemplative element of these. The story
Yes.
plays to it far more than just the facts.
Yes. In fact, let's move on to that poem. Absolutely love this poem so much because it's exactly what I do. I do what this poem says.
Mm,
So yeah,
yes.
what I'll go ahead and read it forward. You read it, then I'll read it backward. Or do you want to read it backwards?
Um, Tell you what, I'll read it forward because I have it easily in front of me, and I haven't studied it backwards. I would have to look at the inflection to figure out how to do it best.
Okay.
But perhaps if you let me take the forwards, you know the backwards here.
Sure. I'll go forward, then you go forward, then I'll go backwards. Okay, so The Peace of Wild
Okay.
Things by Wendell Berry. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day blind stars waiting with their light. For a time I rest in the grace of the world and am free.
The Peace of Wild Things by Wendell Berry. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things. Do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day blind stars waiting with their light. For a time I rest in the grace of the world and am free.
I rest in the grace of the world and am free, waiting for their light, with their light for a time, and I feel above me the day blind stars. Of grief, I come into the presence of still water, who do not tax their lives with forethought. I come into the peace of wild things. Rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I go and lie down where the wood drake, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be. And I wake in the night at the least sound, when despair for the world grows in me.
Mm.
I actually like it backwards.
It's funny. It doesn't have the same slope and contour as when I heard The Learned Astronomer, does it?
Mm-mm.
There's a certain there's a what would they call that? A tension almost through the whole thing that
Mhm.
holds it all together. That little piece of anxiety is still there, and you set it down at the end, but it's still in the midst of. It's funny to listen to that one. It doesn't have the same slope and contour as Whitman's. Hmm.
Right. And I think the tension works because there's already tension in the theme.
Yes, yes.
Mhm. Yeah. So I
That's a
actually,
beautiful poem.
right, I take walks often. We live in a community where we have a lot of little ponds and lakes, and we have a lot of herons.
Mm.
So I do take the time to go watch them and just to be still. And I love rain, and so when it
Mm.
rains, I take walks. And it's interesting how many the birds are different in the rain, and they're still out there, you know.
Yes, yes, they are.
So yeah, tell me what this poem means to you.
This poem means to me a lot of why I do what I do on this homestead.
Mm.
I was a kid who grew up in suburbia, and where I grew up, we were on 1 acre lots. Our homes were there. The homes were pretty much right next to one another. I could look right over. My neighbors was within 30, 40 feet of my side wall on the bedroom. But I love taking my bike cross country. This was back in the 70s and 80s, I guess, early 80s, where it wasn't really frowned upon to ride around the neighborhood and cut through the neighbors' lawns. Everybody kind of knew each other. It was a different feel and flavor. And I loved spending that time out amongst the wild things. I had my public school education where I was within the system for 8 hours a day, and then I was free. And I wanted to take my time and follow the squirrels and figure out where the birds lived. And I had streams I could go find in the woods and spend my time there and unwind. As an introverted kid, in particular, in a world that was constant booming and buzzing all day long, that was a relief for me. It was a release. And my wife and I, when we got married, ended up coming down here to an old piece of family land in Virginia and homesteading. And this place is packed with all the quiet, the peace of those wild things, from the birds on the pond to the frogs, even, and getting a knowledge of where everything lives and how you live amongst the things that are already here is a nice set of lessons unto its own. Everything is in balance. I find a micro version of this same poem every day when I go and take care of animals. I share the animal rounds with my sons, and going out and taking care of not so much the wild things, but the domestic things, and the plants in the garden. There's the moments of peace amidst the hustle of the day, the grading and the deadlines and the preparing for speeches and the other things that come with it. And I very much resonate with Barry on all of these points. I feel them in my soul as much as I read them on a page.
Yeah, same with me. I grew up in a similar type of neighborhood. We had about an acre, and all of the, yeah, rolling hills, and everybody's neighbors were attached. Whereas where I am at, I'm in Texas now, and we have all these privacy fences everywhere. And I miss Ohio.
Yes.
I miss that about living up north. And I lived just 4 houses up off of the Cuyahoga River in Northeast Ohio, and we had a bike trail there. And my grandfather
Mm.
lived with us, and he used to go fishing every morning on the river. And I used to go down as soon as school was out. I would throw my backpack in the house, and I would just march down to the trail and walk down to the waterfall. There used to be a waterfall there, and it's not there anymore. They made it level because they wanted to return the river back to the way it had been. I guess the
Huh.
waterfall was man-made, but the waterfall was beautiful. And I used to sit on the edge with my feet dangling over just, for 20 minutes. And it was just my little private time. Like the
Mhm.
very last line says, "For a time I rest in the grace of the world and am free." And it was my time to sort of recuperate after a long day in a classroom. Um, and just to sit there and be. And I think that's really
Yes.
important for all of us to have that time. And that so now I just go out on my back porch and I look up at the clouds and I just be every morning. It's what I do with when I wake up. And it's really important to our souls to have that time of quiet and being outside and getting that outdoor air.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Isn't it funny the layers on top of being that we tend to write on? There are so many layers that we pile on top of the simplicity of be. I remember being in seventh grade and learning French for the first time, and they taught us the verb être. And I remember being surprised because I'd never really thought of it before that there's a verb for be. This is an action. Yes, it is. It's the most fundamental action, and then everything else kind of layers on top of that. But it's funny. It's funny to think how far we are from simply be these days. We have notifications and buzzes and other things that draw our attention in so many directions. We've manufactured that in many ways, but be is always there underneath it all, lest we forget, and that's one we can all return to,
I
Lord
agree.
willing.
And this is why I do not have Facebook Messenger on my phone because I
Yes.
it would. I mean, I get text, I get emails, but I don't need Facebook Messenger notifications on my phone because yeah.
Yes.
Just in case you missed my announcement at the beginning of this podcast, I wanted to let you know that Chris Hall and I were both invited to lead the teacher sessions at the Society for Classical Learning's 2024 Fall Conference. It will be in Dallas the last weekend in October. He and I are collaborating and are creating not only some wonderful sessions on the theory of classical education as it pertains to the fine arts and the common arts, but also practical sessions where you will leave feeling equipped to apply the arts into your daily lessons. You'll discover the transcendentals, which are truth, goodness, and beauty, through theory and hands-on practicum sessions. This conference is not only for classroom teachers, but also for home educators, and it's for teachers of all grades, K through 12, no matter what subject you teach. Tickets are on sale at the Society for Classical Learning website, so be sure to look for their link to the fall retreat so that you can read more about the conference, our sessions, and register online. Society for Classical Learning's website to this conference is in the show notes of this podcast, and Chris and I both hope to see you there soon. Thanks for listening.
All right, let's move on to the next poem, Sonnet 37 by Shakespeare. Oh,
Oh, yes. Yes. So I have some history with this poem. Um, some who know me know that I went through a period in my gosh, I was 40. It was my late 30s and early 40s where my hips failed me. I have osteoarthritis, and my hip joints completely wore down. I walked with a cane for 2 years. And I did the homesteading life with that cane. I still, split my firewood and did everything else I had to do, but it was very hard. It was very painful. And when I see pictures of myself from that time, I look older than I am now by a long shot. It's funny to see what that kind of constant pain and really decrepitude will do to you over time.
mhm.
What it does to your health. And I can remember my children were young at that age. They were younger, and I couldn't chase them. I couldn't run around the yard. It was hard for me because I had them. I wanted to chase them. I wanted to do things with them. And I had to find some peace in the fact that I couldn't do this now, but nonetheless, I can read with you. I can play music with you. We can play. We can find things to do. I'm going to teach you chess, and I'm going to
Mm,
teach you card games, things we can do where we can share these. And Shakespeare's Sonnet 30, I love all of Shakespeare's sonnets. You really can't go wrong. But 37 has a special place for me, not only from memory of that time in my life. I've since fully recovered. I have two replacement hips. I got them at 40 and 41. And years in, still, here I am living a very active life. I'll never be a marathoner again. but I can bike and backpack and lift weights as much as I want. And I'm thrilled with that. Um, but I'm reminded that this sonnet really strikes me as it's really our job as classical educators. We're handing along not just information, but formation. We're handing along to another generation the fullness of an education, really a paideia. This isn't just the facts and figures, the content of your learning. This is a way of living. And this sonnet just gives me tremendous hope, and it reminds me of where our minds often should be as classical educators. It's just a beautiful one. Would you like to read this one, or would you like me to read it?
You read it first, and then how about we do this? You read it first, then I'll read it backwards, and then you read it forwards again.
Okay.
I
Can
like
do.
I like to play with poetry.
I do too. This is kind of fun for me as a science teacher to play poetry on this one. All right, let's see. Sonnet 37, William Shakespeare. As a decrepit father takes delight to see his active child do deeds of youth, so I, made lame by fortune's dearest spite, take all my comfort of thy worth and truth. For whether beauty, birth, or wealth, or wit, or any of these all or more, entitled in thy parts, do crowned sit, I make my love engrafted to this store. So then I am not lame, poor, nor despised, whilst that this shadow doth such substance give, that I in thy abundance am sufficed. By a part of all thy glory live. Look, what is best? That best I wish in thee. This wish I have, then 10 times happy me.
This wish I have, then 10 times happy me. Look what is best, that best I wish in thee, and by a part of all thy glory live. That I in thy abundance am sufficed, whilst that this shadow doth such substance give. So then I am not lame, poor, nor despised. I make my love engrafted to this store. And tilted in thy parts do crowned sit, or any of these all, or more. Whether beauty, birth, or wealth, or wit, take all my comfort of thy worth and truth. So I, made lame by fortune's dearest spite, to see this active child do deeds of youth, as a decrepit father takes delight.
Sonnet 37, William Shakespeare. As a decrepit father takes delight to see his active child do deeds of youth, so I, made lame by fortune's dearest spite, take all my comfort of thy worth and truth. For whether beauty, birth, or wealth, or wit, or any of these all or more, entitled in thy parts do crowned sit, I make my love engrafted to this store. So then I am not lame, poor, nor despised, whilst that this shadow doth such substance give, that I in thy abundance am sufficed, by a part of all thy glory live. Look, what is best? That best I wish in thee. This wish I have, then 10 times happy me.
Oh, that third time really hit it for me. And I don't like it backwards. Yeah, this one, boy.
It goes back down to the depths, right? He begins with the darkness and moves far to the light. It's wonderful. I love that. The darkness of sitting there, on the side of a field watching my children run while I sit in pain watching this
Yeah.
go. But I realize too that the beauty of this is an educator's point of view. We are going to retire. We are going to fail. Our bodies will fail. But even as they do, young, hey, all these things engrafted to your store, right? Your abundance is suffice for me because now I've passed along this thing that's come to me from generations before. And this is Philippians 4:8. I love this too. Look, what is best? That best I wish in thee. There it is, right? Whatever is good, etc. Keep it going. This is you. Now have fun with it and pass it along well. I love this sonnet for so many reasons.
Oh, it's really, really rich. I feel like now that I'm getting old and I'm a grandmother of five grandchildren, I think this really, really
Oh,
hits me. Yeah, and I have five grandchildren, three and under. And
phew,
yeah, I
wow.
feel the decrepitness of getting older, and I feel the
We
delight.
have years left in us, fortunately. May we
We
may we keep Lord willing, of course.
We do. My husband and I, we recently, I know this is going to really sound terrible, but we subscribe to Hallmark movies during Christmas season. So my husband really likes Hallmark movies, and we were watching one this last Christmas that had a quote in it that we have clung to. And in that movie, um, this man was selling his bookstore, very successful, beautiful bookstore. And his store manager said to him, well, why are you leaving? You have this very successful, beautiful bookstore. Everybody loves this enchanting, lovely bookstore. I mean, who would want to sell this enchanting, loving bookstore, right? I mean, I wouldn't want to. And his whole life's work was devoted to this beautiful bookstore. And he said, well, we have some grandchildren and we have to move to go be near them because grandchildren are magical. And my husband and I have clung to the term that grandchildren are magical. And I think this poem just kind of takes me there to the magic of grandchildren and how you really do delight in watching them have that beautiful energy, no matter how tired you are, your inability to get down on the floor and play with them, but to be able to just delight in watching them, like he says, and by a part of all thy glory live. Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah, just that children are magical.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. That's one of the most fun things about being an educator. I have done it for more than half of my adult life. This is year 26. I'm 47, going on 48. And this reminds me. This poem reminds me not only of my own kids, but simply that handing along every year and the magic that shows up in your classroom. I
Hmm.
have a few friends who say, "How can you teach the same grade for 12 years? They never get any older." And I said, "Yes, but that's also one of the wonderful things about them. You really come to learn that age, right? And they're all individuals; they're all their own. And here you are changing, but that age remains. It is a wonderful thing. Wonderful thing.
It's true. And you don't get tired because every class is different because the children are different and they have different thoughts and ideas than the class that you had the year before.
Yes.
Yeah.
But they all need help with time management, and they all need help with annotation, and they all need help with how to talk to one another and solve problems, and all the things that are beyond even the scope and sequence of a curriculum. That's the beautiful thing about it. This is such a human profession, and I find this sonnet to be one of the most human of all of his. He can speak in others of romantic love and other things, but this one is truly parental. It's a parental type sonnet, and it strikes me in new ways because of that.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Well, thank you, Chris, for sharing this with us. I'm really excited. I think our listeners are going to be tickled to get to hear these poems. It was really fun. I appreciate your time.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for listening. You can get involved in a few ways. There's a Facebook page where we actively discuss the ideas around classical education. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/classical education. And if you want to help offset our production costs, you can support the podcast financially by going to www.classicaleducationpodcast.com/support. As the great artist and educator John Ruskin once said, "Well, my friends, the final result of the education I want you to give your children will be in a few words this: they will know what it is to see the sky, they will know what it is to breathe it, and they will know best of all what it is to behave under it as in the presence of a Father who is in heaven."